Hi, my name's Amy from Game Dev London, and today I'm joined here with Eden from FuturLab. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Eden.
Hiya, I'm Eden. I'm currently working as an assistant producer on Power Wash Simulator. We released just recently. And before that, I was doing QA at Frontier Developments. I've been in the games industry for just over 2 years now.
Oh, wow, cool. So today I just wanted to chat to you about production in the games industry and what it's like and how you found it, really. But before we chat about production, I want to know a little bit more about yourself. So, what's your favorite game right now?
Oh, I know I just said that I worked at Frontier Developments. I've been playing a lot of Planet Zoo recently, actually.
Planet
It's
Zoo.
Yeah, it's one of those games where you can just kind of almost just let it do its own thing and then
Yeah.
relax while it's going. And I like to set the camera on one of the animals.
Yeah,
And
it's kind
kind
of
of,
like The Sims, but with animals. Yeah,
absolutely.
I love that. Why is it your favorite game then? Is it one you can sort of kick back and relax, or?
um, I mean, I'd say favorite game. It's the one that I'm playing the most of right now. My favorite game always changes, but it's just the kind of thing at the moment. I can
Okay.
just put it on and I can like do something else if I need to, or it's nice to have it on in the background, kind of.
Yeah, definitely. Is it sort of, do you find yourself playing loads of games like Planet Zoo, or is there a particular genre you're always drawn to?
Generally, my two main genres that I always find myself playing completely by accident are RPGs and like strategy games and base builders and stuff.
Oh wow, yeah, I love strategy games as well. That's really cool. Like, imagine if you could tie strategy in with Planet Zoo and make a
Mm.
strategy zoo game. That would be awesome.
The best zoo, the best animals.
Yeah. So, what about your favorite retro games? So, sort of post 90s. Do you have one of
Mm.
those?
Um, yeah, I don't play a huge amount of retro games. I do like older games. I'm not fussed about like janky games, but things
Hmm.
like Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines.
Oh,
I
okay.
wouldn't say that's retro, but I know a few people who refuse to play it because it's too old.
Oh,
And I don't mind older games, but I don't go that far back.
yeah, that's fair enough. So what about, because you're a producer, you must know about some game dev books that helped you on your journey to become a producer. Do you have any suggestions and recommendations for production game dev books? Or if it's not production, that's fine as well. Maybe you've read a QA book that you really like. Is there something like that?
I've read a couple of production books. Some of them are production in games is very different to production in other fields. So some of
Mm.
them are very like agile or like software oriented, which are good at introducing the concept of production. But then there's a lot of stuff in it that is just completely different from how it is in games. I quite like the game production Toolbox by I think it's by Heather Maxwell Chandler,
Okay.
because it's just a good like games introduction, and it really gives you a good lowdown of not just production, but also this is how things work in the games industry, and these are the other roles that you'll be working alongside. And it's quite good at an all round introduction to game development as a whole.
Okay, so would you recommend that to someone who's maybe not sure about whether they want to become a producer or not, or would you recommend that to someone who's pretty sure they want to do production?
I think anyone who wants to know more about what production is like, because I think
Yeah.
production is quite nebulous. I mean,
Mm.
at least when I first started getting into the games industry, I wasn't really sure what production is. I was just like, that's just everyone's producing a game when they're working on it. It's everyone's creating it, but it is a good way of like putting everything on the table and saying this is actually what you do
Yeah.
as a
Okay, so
producer.
it's sort of breaking it apart a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll put that book in the description of the video if anyone wanted to check it out. So what's your what's your top tip for new developers and producers?
Um, Probably don't be afraid to ask questions. It's a very
Definitely.
generic one, but I've heard it so many times, and it is really true. It's just everyone's going to make mistakes, even like the senior higher ups are going to not know things sometimes, and being unafraid to be new and inexperienced and say to people like even to higher up people or whatever, I'm not sure what's going on here. I can give you all of the information that I have. Can you help me fill in the blanks?
Yeah. Oh wow. Okay, yeah. So how about tips for people who are from different pathways wanting to weave into production?
I would say that production is obviously a lot of managing,
Yes.
um, and there's a lot of like people skills involved,
People
which you don't
skills.
tend to get in other disciplines as much. So
Definitely.
if you are like on that kind of level where you're managing other people in
Mm,
your discipline, like you're a lead programmer or whatever, and even if it's not like an official thing, if you're not officially the lead, but you are the kind of person that people feel like they can approach and say, "Oh, I'm not sure how to do this thing. Can I have your help with that?" I think
yeah.
that's a really good start. And as well, outside of your work, there are other things that you can do to um, create that like sense of approachability and like helping other people out. Like you can find something that you enjoy doing and start running it. I'll help run game jams and stuff.
Oh yeah, game jams. That's a really good thing to mention because I've talked to some of my friends about game jams who didn't know too much about the concept, and they just thought, oh, it's just programmers and just artists who are making games. But people don't actually speak about producers doing game jams and marketers making nice descriptions and marketing things. Sorry, I don't know much about marketing, but the other roles which can be done in game jams, no one talks about them. So, have you done any game jams as a producer?
Yeah, most of the game jams I've done, um, it's obviously quite a small team, and you do have to wear a bunch of different hats in
Yeah.
such a short amount of time. Um, but the production element really does help, especially for game jams, because I mean, in any project, you find that you're building up from the base, and you're like, wow, this is so exciting. What if we also did this and that and the other? And it's really good to have that element of let's just pull the whole thing back a little bit, especially in a game jam, and to decide what do we need to have by the end of this like 48 hours or this week or whatever, and have that like minimum viable product. And that production is really good to like understand that and understand what you need to have.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would be really useful to have a producer on some of the game jams I do because it's a complete mess. We have tasks dotted around everywhere on a Miro board and no one knows what they're doing. So I think a producer would really be good for game jams. So if anyone out there wants to be a producer, just hop on the game jam train, join a team, and try out production if you're interested.
Absolutely.
So another thing that I think some people who are newer to the games industry don't really understand is the difference between a game designer and a producer, because they kind of they think they're the same thing. So what would you say to people who think that essentially?
It's a whole other world. It's worlds apart. Designers are, I tend to describe them to people who don't know games as like the directors of
Mm,
games. They decide what the player is going to experience, and then the producer just does pretty much anything else. They get other disciplines to communicate with each other and say, okay, well, art needs this, and I need to let the programmers and the designers know, and design has this problem with that, so I need to let the programmers know about that, getting everyone together and getting them all to talk about what they need. And then on like a higher level, you have other things like a lot of like dealing with publishers and stuff.
Mm.
If you're working with consoles, there's loads of certification. You need to have a lot of communication between development and the console, the first party console company. As well, like the QA is a huge thing because you get to a point, we've just released, and you get to a point just before release where basically all of development is testing, fixing, testing, fixing.
Yeah.
And so that's become a really big part of my job recently is making sure that the things that need to be fixed are being fixed, and the things
Mm.
that don't need to be fixed, we'll look at them later, and just prioritizing everything.
Yeah, so um, that actually, now that you describe it, that sounds like really stressful coming to release. What is it like day to day on a sort of non-release week versus a release week? What's the differences then?
It's very difficult to say what do you do day to day. When I actually started at FuturLab, I was told never plan for your whole day.
Yeah,
Plan for about half of the day because a new thing will always come up. And it is always a different thing each day. Sometimes, like I say, it's dealing with first party consoles, sometimes it's giving publishers the information they need, sometimes it's just, oh, no one needs anything from me today, so I'm going to clean up the bug database or whatever. Um, on a release week, there tends to be a lot more. I mean, it swings and roundabouts because you get to a point where everything's kind of settled and you know in advance this is the version of the game that's going out. But then you also have, oh, we need to do this thing and get it out as soon as the game's released, like as soon as we can. So yeah, there is like that element. It's like a safety net almost. We've got this
yeah,
kind of like, okay, we can relax a little bit, but not too much because there's still lots to do.
yeah. Okay. So how about on Power Wash Simulator? Can you tell us a bit about the different production tools which are used, if you're able to? Because I know some teams, smaller teams, might use something like Miro. Um, Teams with a bigger repository with all these different people might use something a bit more adaptable, like Azure DevOps. There are loads of different tools out there. So, what tools do you recommend people look into for different instances?
So we use Jira a lot, and
Jira. Yeah.
it covers us almost completely.
Mm.
We were using Handsoft.
Okay, I've not heard
Um,
of that one.
it's basically a bug task management database.
Yeah.
Um, it looks very complex, but it's actually really simple. It's one of
Yeah.
those things that looks more complicated than it needs to be.
I think that's a lot of those production tools. They look
Mm.
complicated when you look at a Jira ticket. You're like, what is this? And then you break it down and you're like, oh, this is really useful actually. Oh,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Oh,
you've frozen a bit there, but I think you're back.
thank
I think,
you.
yeah, you're back now. What about other tools you recommend? Um,
Um, I mean, we have just used Handsoft and Jira. I'm trying to
hmm.
think what other use. Um, so as a lot of like
Sorry, Egan,
setup
you're
on that end,
actually
and
breaking up a lot. I don't have any feedback from you.
on
Let's just wait a second.
internet maybe.
It might be mine. My internet's not always the best.
Mine cuts out quite often.
Um,
Is it back now?
your lips were
Testing 1, 2,
moving.
3.
You
Is that
weren't
better?
saying anything, and then I got the audio through, so it was out of
Right,
sync, and it was really weird.
right. I get you. Is it
Okay.
better now?
Yeah, I think we're better now. Okay, let's sort of
Okay.
continue on the um, part about production tools.
Yeah,
Any other production tools you recommend?
yeah. So as like an assistant producer, I haven't done a lot of the higher level setup. So the tools that we have used sometimes it just kind of looks like a web server. So the things that I have most experience in are Jira and Handsoft and setting
Okay.
stuff up there.
Okay. So what sort of um, so say a smaller team's getting together for a university project. They're a team of, let's say, 5, and they Jira looks massive to them. So is there other ways you think they could approach production for this project, task management? Do you think it's a good idea to start off with a whiteboard and pen, or do you think it's good to get straight into making tickets on a fancy website?
I think for like if you're doing a game jam project or like a week long project, don't
Mm,
waste a couple of days figuring out Jira. I would
yeah,
definitely recommend doing it in your own time though. It is really simple to use once you get the hang of it. But if you're sitting down and you've got X amount of time to make a game, I would say just I mean as simple as just post-it notes. I've
post-it notes.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say post-it notes as well. I remember doing a game jam once where I was just sticking post-it notes on the wall, and I was like, the further to the right it is, the higher priority it is,
Oh,
um,
nice.
and the further up it is, the more time it will take, or something like that.
So it's sort of
And
like a graph of post-it notes.
yeah, and just creating like that little system that you understand. As long as I mean, it doesn't even have to be post-it notes. It could be a whiteboard, like you say. As long as you and your team understand what's happening and you know this one is the most important thing, um, then that's great. It works. All production is basically just learning to communicate and making sure that people understand what needs to be done.
Definitely.
You don't need fancy tools to do that. You just
Yeah,
need to have a good system in place.
yeah. Um, how about we chat a bit about scope, because I know scope is an issue for every game. There's usually too big of a scope, too small of a scope. So, what was Power Wash Simulator like on that behalf?
Um, I know that the scope. I mean, every game the scope does have to get cut down quite a bit. I mean, I find it quite difficult to cut down the scope. I have to fight my creative brain with my production brain a lot of the time and say, but this would be really nice, but we can't do it. Um, I think it's definitely better to cut early and cut
Yeah,
more. And you hear that and you always think, yeah, of course it is. But then it gets down to it. You're like, but I really don't want to cut this thing. It's just got to go. You just got to be really harsh with yourself.
yeah.
It,
Okay.
it does take a lot of discipline.
Yeah, definitely. I can imagine like you have a really cool feature, but you're like, oh, it does. We don't have time for it.
Mm.
So have you had anything happen like that for um okay, that's not a good question. I've already technically asked that question. Um how about communication then? So you say production is a lot of people skills. So how would you um what sort of things would you recommend? Because you've recommended before game jams and trying out different ways to build your people skills. Um, how about say there's a student at university who wants to be a producer, um, what sort of things? I can't think of any questions at the moment.
Sorry. Um,
um,
but if I was trying to encourage someone to build up their people skills,
yeah, people
for
skills.
example. So if you're at university, I mean, there's hundreds of things that you can do that are going on at university anyway. Joining some kind of society or club is always really
Yeah,
good. Um, and if you can like get onto the committee or the running of that society, that's always a really, really good start,
Yeah.
because it's a very low stakes way of
Mhm.
saying, like, I'm going to manage this thing and I'm going to communicate with these people and put the pieces together.
Yeah.
Um, and I think as well, though, if you don't want to get involved in a society, if nothing is that interesting to you, you can find part-time work as well. I found that was quite
Definitely.
useful. Just because all those little interactions that you have with people that you're probably never going to see again, it does just add up into people skills.
Yeah, in a way, I kind of feel like you could build those people skills through, like you said, part-time jobs in retail, for example, because you're always talking to
Mm.
people in retail. Um, I feel like retail would really help. What do you think about that then? Do you think that sort
Yeah,
of stuff?
I think so. I think as well you have to deal with quite a lot of hard-headed people in retail,
Mm,
and so it's a good exercise in not just um, dealing with people professionally, but also if you need to, like, holding yourself back and giving yourself a second to think, how am I going to deal with this person in a professional manner? Um, I worked at a night while I was at university, and so you get a lot of people coming in, and I thought that was also quite a good way of that, because that's kind of retail on hard mode at that point.
yeah, yeah. So how about scenarios within work that are either funny or frustrating about production that you can tell us about?
Oh, frustrating. I don't know. I personally very much like FuturLab, and there's a lot of frustrating scenarios that happen. I think it's a great company to work for. I'm sure there have been days where I've just been like, I can't deal with this, but it's usually things that it's not really anyone's fault necessarily. It's
Yeah.
just things kind of align um, in a really poor way.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, it's. I mean, every day is different when
definitely,
in
yeah.
production. So to come up with one example is a bit. I'm not sure what the word is, but like there is just so much happening constantly. It's quite difficult to like pin down one thing. Um,
Okay. So how about, well, good scenarios? Let's talk about the positives. Anything you've really loved doing whilst working at FuturLab?
um, so I really like it when I'm sure. I mean, this is the same across all of game development. That having a new feature going out or being implemented is genuinely just one of the best feelings of working in games. We introduced multiplayer to Power last year,
Yeah.
and we were testing it internally, and we have like the time lapses when you finish the level,
Mm.
of the level being cleaned, and to watch everyone's little character models running around cleaning it. Um, that was quite possibly my favourite moment of working on Power Wash Simulator.
Oh, that sounds so sweet. Like finally implementing multiplayer and seeing it in action. That's,
Absolutely.
yeah, that sounds amazing. What about, how has COVID affected your role? Have you found yourself liking working from home or in the studio? What's your preference?
So I actually joined the games industry during
Yeah,
COVID in 20.
within the last 2 years.
Yeah, so I had never worked in an office before COVID, so I
Mm.
started working from home, and to me that was the normal. Um, and I got the opportunity to go work in the office when I started at FuturLab, and so it's really helped with my like personal productivity.
Yeah.
There are obviously days where I'd rather just like, oh, I just want to wake up at 8:55 and start rolling. Um, it's helped me a lot, like professionally, and helped me be productive. Um, and it's given me a lot more energy, I think, as well at the end of the
To
day.
work in person.
Yeah, and it's nice as well to see your co-workers in the office and like sit down and have lunch with them, and you don't really get to like build up a relationship with people online,
Mm.
I've found. Or it's quite difficult, at least. You don't just kind of have a conversation in passing.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So have you found any difference to how you use production tools in person versus at home? Because I imagine at home you're using um, Jira, as you mentioned, pretty much all the time to plan out things. But have you found it different in person? Have you found yourself writing more things down in meetings and planning things differently and then eventually making them into tickets at the end of the day? Or what's it been like job wise?
I think, I mean, my most important tool when I'm working in the office is just speaking to people.
Mm,
So we're currently a remote first studio, but we do
yeah.
have an office. So there are a couple of people in there. And I remember one time there was this big bug, or I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like a bug or a crash of some description. Um, and it was just me and two programmers in the office, and we're all kind of just sitting down with our heads together, going, "What is this? How can we fix it? How can we narrow it down?" And it was definitely the most efficient uh, bug catch that I've ever had.
Mm,
Um, it took about half an hour, if that, to narrow down what was causing it.
yeah. And it would have taken longer if you were
Mm.
at home.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Um, How about any achievements that you're really proud about being a producer, or this could be when you were QA?
I'm quite proud of a lot of just like overall the position that I've found. I'm pretty impressed with myself, thinking about when I was at university and everyone wanted to get into the games industry, and then looking back and thinking about the other people who I was at university with, and I'm pretty impressed with where I've come since then. But on a specific level as well, I'm quite impressed with how I've personally like adapted to what needs to be done. So if I'm told to do localization on the project, for example, it's like a week or two. It's always a week or two of just absolutely scrambling. Like I don't know what I'm doing, what's going on. But then I notice that I'm learning because I'm not
Yeah,
struggling as much.
yeah, that's really good. Just putting yourself in the deep end to learn new things.
Mm.
How about well, what about your future journey? What would you like to do? Would you like to go on to the from assistant producer to full time producer? Well, full producer, not full
Yeah,
time.
it's that's a tricky one. I studied games design at uni, thinking I was
Mm,
going to be a designer, and then I kind of discovered production and realised that I actually found it quite fun, which not a lot of people do. But I enjoyed it, and I found that I was quite good at it. Um, and I always thought like I'll probably go into production and then move into design later in life. But honestly, I'm looking at people working in design now. I think that production is, for me at least, where it's at.
yeah.
Um, and I can always like stretch my creative muscles at home, like with game jams and stuff, or just work on personal projects.
Mm,
But I do think production's a good um, way to like keep that creative energy for yourself, but
yeah,
also
yeah.
you still get to work in games, so it's great.
Oh, I love that. I love how you mentioned you do production and then if you want to do a bit of design, you do game jams. That's a really good way that you could do both.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I like that. So what about let's see. Oh, do you have any questions or things you wanted to mention about production itself? Overall things.
I lost you for a second now. What was that, sorry?
Yeah, I was just asking, is there any overall things you want to mention about production, or any inspirations you have in production, or I don't know, anything?
Um, it's quite daunting when you first think about it because it's very like soft skilled thing,
Yeah.
and I feel like with programming you kind of have this idea of where you are on the scale of a good
Definitely.
programmer, whereas with production it's very like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm a great producer or if I'm just terrible, and there's not really any way of knowing that until you try, until you get like stuck in. And
Mhm.
it's not the kind of thing that you're just naturally good at or naturally terrible at as well. It is the kind of thing that you can learn, even if it doesn't feel like it, because you can pick up a book and that will tell you how production works, but it doesn't give you the skills that you need
Yeah,
to
you need to
produce
practice them
something.
over time.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. I think that's a really good place to finish things off.
Yeah.
So that has been production in the games industry with Eden from FuturLab. Would you like to say any parting words?
Um, Production's great. It's great
Yeah,
fun.
love that. All right. Well, thank you for joining us thank you for joining us in Game Dev London. I hope to see you soon, and goodbye.
Bye.